Hi, welcome to Quirky Queen's Journals. My name's Kirsten. So I'm just doing a couple more art journal pages. This is 300 GSM watercolour paper, A5 size. So I used a yellow soft pastel and this is a black oil pastel. Took me a while there. And this is a blue chalk pastel. So with this one, I'm using very, very vibrant, mostly primary colours. And I like to do this because then what I like to do is I like to push them back using sort of white paint, but pushing them back at different levels. You'll also see later on when I use the red chalk pastel, that I have realised that the red chalk pastel is a very determined colour and it takes a lot to push it back. So I think when I use the red chalk pastels in future, I will try and use them a bit more sparingly. I think that the chalk pastel itself, the red one, is actually quite crumbly and it lays down a lot more than the other ones do. So this is Hooker's Green acrylic paint. So as usual, there's no plan with these. I'm very much clearly in a bit of a happy mood, judging by the colour choices and going so vibrant so fast. I like to make lots of lines and lots of shapes and then try and make forms with them. That is some glazing medium I put down before I put down this high flow acrylic paint, which is like an acrylic ink. So I like to, paint using different mediums and try kind of new methods that I've seen other people using. And I like to kind of push them and see how far you can take them to make, to improve and find a different way to make something. I've recently discovered Gerda Lipinski, and she has some amazing techniques. It was Daily Dose of Paper that put me on to her, and I'm very grateful because I don't know why she's never came up in my recommended videos, but she hadn't. She will now. So this is quinacridone gold, a colour nickel azo gold. Oh, I'm not sure. It's a sort of gold colour that Golden make and a lot of people use it. So to me it's like an orange colour, so it goes well with the blue. So I'm making some sort of hills here. They're not hills, but it's a hills type shape. I have a stencil that I love that I think it looks like a sort of old-fashioned bridge where the underneath is like the arches. So that's what, that's why I drew this, because I really like that stencil and it was close by and I spotted it. I actually use, when I put on collage later on, I actually use a collaged piece of that kind of bridge stencil I was talking about. So I'm liking this on the left more than the one on the right. But you'll find when you do two at a time that you chop and change between them. And there's one that always just seems to come together more easily than the other. I think that's your brain's way of letting you cope with it. Because if they were both going, you were struggling with both of them, you'd be a bit stressed. So this is me, like I says, about laying down the colours and the lines and the shapes and then pushing them back, deciding where the areas are that you think it's too busy, or the shape and the lines haven't come together quite like you wanted them to, or you just want to emphasise another area. As you can see, I'm spreading the white paint quite thinly, and the paint that I'm using is it is heavy body, but you can still put on a very thin scraping of it, and you know, it gives you some transparency to see through. Later on I use a much more heavy bodied paint to try and really push back some of that red that I was talking about. And also the high flow acrylic paints, I have used the white of that as well to try and push back the red, because it's also quite opaque. This is it from this is collage from the collage black and white collage paper video I made recently. In fact, they both are from that, and that's that bridge stencil I was talking about. So when I put down the collage, or when I'm putting on new lines or shapes, I like to find some way to connect it to what's already on the page. I actually didn't used to do that I used to purposely not connect them. But now I do. It just seems, I don't know, it feels right to me to do that. You know, there are subtle changes in the way that you approach your art when you're doing it often, and you know, it's a good thing because that's you improving and changing up, and also you know, picking up on techniques that other people are using, you know, that you hadn't thought of, or you've maybe subconsciously picked it up. I'm sure it was Jackie Schomburg I was watching, and I noticed that when she was laying down the collage pieces, she was connecting them to lines that were already there. And I think that's what made me think about it more. I can't be 100% sure it was her. I'm 90% sure it was. So this is red high flow acrylic paint, which is like acrylic ink, and as you can see, a drop or two goes very, very far. But it's also I've covered quite a large area with quite a solid block of colour, which in some ways it does work, but in other ways I think if it had been a lighter shade, it would have worked better. Like, see the way it's going on a bit lighter on the other side till I add in more. So most sort of art journal pages type art, I've been starting off with black lines kind of across the page, and I'm really enjoying using these primary colours because it makes me feel happy just using them. And also I think because they are more childlike colours, that it almost gives you permission to just be a bit wilder and not be so precious about it. I think when it's black lines, it feels more adult-like. Don't know whether or not they just make your brain think a bit differently. I don't know. But I just really enjoyed this, and I actually think that having those big areas of red also made a difference. Now, that was just a wee still photograph. And it's funny because I took that photograph using the same camera, which is on my phone, under the same lights, and yet it came out so dark looking. But there you go. So that's the tissue paper collage that I'd cut out the sort of B shape from. So that was the outline that I've put on the other side. It's quite, I like to do different things on each page, but I also like to have it's not very professional, is it? I also like to have pieces that connect them, and collage paper is actually a very good way to do that. Do you know, it took me quite a few layers to actually tone down the red. See, from the chalk pastel, the way it spreads through the white paint. So Like I said, that took me a long time to tone that down. However, there was some lovely graduations from it. And it also left hints of it around the page. And I don't know whether or not kind of being distracted by trying to make the red work on the page, whether that helped me approach this a bit differently, because I found that these came together really quite easily. It's probably because I was it was all about removing the red for a portion of it. So, and then it's like, oh, I've done quite a lot. I love the depth that the different layers of white paint give to the painting. You know, when you've just started off with what's very simple shapes and lines, the different opaqueness created by the white paint really does add a lot of depth. And it also, I think because the colours were so bright to start with, I was able to experiment a bit more with the white paint than I normally would. I normally just think of putting down the white paint as right, let's push this bit into the background. But this time I was thinking about the different values that you can give to the, the colours that are already there. And I never think about values because it kind of, it feels too complex in my head. Maybe this is a first step towards it. Obviously, I do think about values. I always put a black and white filter on my pictures, when they're on the phone, just to sort of see what the range of values are, and if there's like a really dense area of mid values that is off balance with like the dark and light values. So unfortunately there's a bit of video that I've missed. I really thought it was recording, but it is me doing more of this, just repeating kind of what I've already done, and you can see it there. So there's a couple of collage bits been added in and some more shapes and lines, but really it has been a repetition of what's went before. Now I will say with this purple, the way that they say, oh, you should do odd numbers of things. So I'm thinking, oh, if I've put purple on once, I really need to put it in other areas. Well, this sent me on a bit of a wild goose chase in that exact corner where I just sat it and wiped it off. See where that purple triangle is? Oh, this was a disaster. I did manage to rescue it and I was quite happy with it. But I kind of thought to myself, why am I trying to paint by numbers? I should really just look at the page and do what feels right, for the page, not what makes up an odd number. So this is the very heavy body paint coming out, and you can see the difference when it goes on. It's very opaque. Still not opaque enough to cover up the red chalk pastel in one go though. I hadn't realised at the time when I was doing this, but when I went back to make the video, I realised the one on the left actually looks like a sort of old farmhouse cottage. Which I wish I'd realised at the time. I might not have put a big purple triangle on it if I'd thought of that at the time. So this is me having realised, let's not think about the odd numbers and let's just do what feels right for the page. And that big purple and blue rectangle was not right for the page. Oh, see on the left hand side, the green kind of spatula that is a cake decorating tool. Well, I have been using that as a bit of a palette. And it looks terrible and it looks like a right state, but actually it's been really good, and I've been using it, that I've had less paint wastage using that as a palette. So I'm thinking of investing in some sort of plastic where it can be peeled off. Oh, so I'm adding in red chalk pastel here to try and rectify the purple triangle situation. And all I've done is changed it to a red square situation that then becomes a red rectangle situation. Oh, it just gets worse and worse. See the difference putting a bit of white paint over that green chalk pastel made? I loved how that looked quite rough. However, just brushing a bit of the white paint around the edges of that line, it kept the roughness, but it tidied it up at the same time. I brought out the Posca pen, and do you know what? I was quite devastated at first when I did this. I thought, oh, Kirsten, what have you done? But see, when I lift this back off, I did put some water in there. That's what I was putting on top of the paintbrush. But see, when I lift these two off, oh, they look fantastic. I'm so happy with them. So if I hadn't been having all these disasters, the house windows wouldn't have looked as good as that. So I'm about to make it worse by adding in some of the red high flow acrylic paint and then some white paint to make it into a big pink triangle. There we go. So I'm just tidying up round that half circle. Muting back the purple L shape that I put on to try and have 3 purple areas because I had a bit of purple in the collage. I think when you're using the primary colours, they're all so vibrant, and because I am using them, at the end of the day, the biggest colour here is white. Different tones of white, but it is white. So, you know, I don't think we need to think overly much about complementary because the tones of the colours are all the same and they're very, you know, they're primary colours. I used a scoring tool dipped into the high flow acrylic paint there to create that sort of red loop, and then I've done it here as well to connect the 2 black collage pieces, which I feel brought this together, the one on the right. But yeah, that was a very good thing to use because it gives a nice rough but really thin line. So this is it, the finished piece. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you soon, and I hope you enjoyed. Bye.